Attorney Dan Lennington from the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty joins me this morning. Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Good morning. Doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. There are so many topics that we can discuss, so much like a flurry of activity. It probably is always that way with Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, but in particular, I see that, we'll start with this. We'll start with the lawsuit that you filed against Joe Biden and the ATF. Let's talk about that.
Yes, so there was a rule that recently was going to go into effect about something called stabilizing braces. Now, these braces are owned by over 40 million Americans, and they are attached to what are generally called the heavy pistols, so AR-style pistols. And the braces were developed by combat veterans who came home and found some of these veterans were disabled or they lacked some strength in their arms, and they felt, and that was proven to be true, that having these braces on their forearms stabilized the weapon when they fired it, making it more accurate and therefore more safe. Well, these became very, very popular in the last few years. And the Biden administration saw this as a way to basically confiscate or ban about 40 million handguns or pistols in America, because what they did is they said, well, this thing that is attached to the back of the pistol, which stabilizes it, that sort of looks like a shoulder stock, and a shoulder stock is something that's on a rifle. And rifles have to have barrels that are a certain length, and if they don't have barrels that are a certain length, they're called short barrel rifles, and therefore you must register these weapons with the ATF, pay a tax, and be on a national federal gun registry if you own them. Well, this was, a bridge too far, and we filed a lawsuit on behalf of 3 combat veterans, 2 from Wisconsin and 1 from Texas. And last week we received an injunction against the Biden administration, forbidding the Biden administration from enforcing this rule against our clients. So it was a major victory for us. And what's going on here nationally is that we have sort of a revolution in the Second Amendment that's going on, playing out all over the country right now. The United States Supreme Court has breathed new life into the Second Amendment. And really the burden is on states and cities and counties that if they have any type of gun regulation, that gun regulation is going to be scrutinized very heavily in federal courts. And the state or the county or the city or the federal government who is ever imposing these regulations on the ownership or possession of guns or gun parts have got to meet a very strict test. And so that's really good news for Americans who value their Second Amendment rights. And we look forward to more litigation in this area and more ability to protect people's right to self-defense and right to own a pistol or a rifle for recreation or hunting or whatever they want to own it. They don't need a reason to own their firearms. So we're very happy with the decision, but the fight's continuing, and we're looking to expand this injunction to cover more people in the country.
So, despite the obvious, what do you think the Biden administration's objective or the end game is in all of this? Are they just testing the waters to see how far they can get away with things, and then anticipating that they're going to be sued or that there will be legal action if they don't back off?
Right. I think their strategy is probably an incremental strategy. So the real the wish of progressive liberal Democrats is not to have any firearms in America. I mean, that's pretty clear. They don't want law-abiding citizens to own firearms. Apparently, they have no objection to all the individuals who are, shooting up Chicago on the weekends or Milwaukee on the weekends having firearms. It's not them. They're concerned about these law-abiding people having firearms. And they know that they can't ban the possession of firearms or the ownership of firearms. at least now, because our Supreme Court is really protecting the Second Amendment. And so what has been going on in the last, several decades is an attempt by the left to have a firearms registry, so that when you own a firearm, your name has to go on a list, and you have to put your address down. You have to pay a tax. And people who own firearms don't understandably want to have their name on a registry. There's a lot of things we own that we don't want the government to know that we own, and the government has no right to know that we own them or where they are. Because if the government knows where your gun is, then the next step is, if political powers change in this country, they know where all the weapons are. And we, value our Second Amendment rights, and we don't want to be placed on a national gun registry. So I think that's what they're trying to do. And so what they are doing this incrementally, they said, well, we can basically put 40 million pistols on a registry by redefining these pistols as, quote, short barrel rifles. And so they tried to do it, and they've got blocked. They will try to do other things, and we're seeing a lot of litigation right now over what are called, quote, assault weapons. That's what the liberals and Democrats call them, although they're never able to define how an assault weapon is any different than a normal hunting rifle. It's certainly not more powerful in most circumstances. And then magazine clips, how many pieces of ammo you can have. But the courts and the U.S. Supreme Court are continually pushing back on these restrictions. Just up until 2008, you couldn't have a handgun in Washington, D.C. to defend your own home. And that was struck down in really the first major decision enforcing the Second Amendment ever. So it wasn't, until, we got the Second Amendment in 1793. It wasn't until 2008 that really the Second Amendment meant anything for anybody. And it was just last year that the U.S. Supreme Court required now states to allow people to conceal carry, because New York effectively, for most people, banned concealed carry, except for bodyguards of celebrities were allowed to conceal carry. But now in New York State, basically the constitutional rule now is it must issue a right to carry around a pistol or a concealed weapon. And that was a huge decision, and that was last year was called Bruin. And so since that decision, a lot of these regulations and restrictions on ownerships of guns are increasing. The litigation's increasing. People are standing up and saying, you're not going to take away the weapons that I use for self-defense, that I use for recreation, and that I use for hunting. And we have a right to these weapons, a right to possess these weapons, and people are standing up, and we at the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty are very happy to represent them pro bono.
Oh, well, thank God for your organization. I appreciate it. So what are you up to now, like 9 lawsuits against the Biden administration?
Yes, we have 9 lawsuits. This was our 4th major victory. And we still have a few pending out there. We are still challenging very vigorously the race-based preferences and race-based programs that the Biden administration implements, where they just last month we filed a lawsuit against this agency called the Minority Business Development Agency, which is supposed to help businesses, but it won't help any businesses owned by white people. And we represent clients in Wisconsin and Texas in that lawsuit also, and that's pending. And we're battling the ESG investing rule in federal court, and we've got a lot more planned, because the clock is ticking on this Biden administration. It's June of 2023. They know that they basically just have about a year left. Before that campaign is in full swing in 2024, and they're going to be scrambling, that administration, and the Republicans in Congress don't seem to be very interested in standing in their way by continually authorizing them trillions and trillions of more spending and not calling back some of these illegal and unconstitutional programs they have. So, what we're going to have to do is be vigilant, and we're going to have to take them to in the court to hold their feet to the fire and protect our rights. And we're going to need patriots to stand up and put their hand in the air and say, yes, I would like to sue the Biden administration. I would like to stop this illegal power grab or this thing that's taking away our rights. And so, I have the easy job. I have the easy job of doing the legal work. The hard job is the people who have the courage to stand up and to say, this is enough. I'm going to stand up for our rights, and we need someone to protect them, at least until 2024, when we hopefully get a new president.
Amen. So in the remaining time, I think you've already referenced it, but I did see a press release from Will, the Small Business Assistance Program. And I'm looking at their criteria, and it appears that, as you said, their qualifications are racist. For qualifying small businesses for these grants.
Yeah, we've seen this really hit into high gear in 2020, 2021, that summer of the George Floyd riots, that all across the country, the federal government certainly, and even cities and counties are sometimes they call it reparations. They literally call it reparations. There's programs in Tennessee we've looked at before where they say it's reparations, but what they do is they give out grants, and grants are just a check. So they just give out checks to certain people, and they base it on race. And sometimes they do it under the guise of saying, well, we're helping out small businesses. And then, you look at the details and they say, well, we're helping out disadvantaged small businesses. And then you look at those details and you find out, well, disadvantaged means people who are not white and not Asian. And so, yes, these all across the country, there are these programs out there. Tony Evers runs some of them. There's we've seen some in Milwaukee and Madison. I imagine all in the listening area, some of the more progressive cities like La Crosse and Eau Claire, even Wausau might be considering programs like this. But they give out money to small businesses, and then in the fine print they discriminate based on race. And right now we're on the verge of challenging one in San Antonio. We have a client down there who is ineligible to receive assistance as a small business because he's white. And so this is really another area you got to remain vigilant. Race discrimination is illegal and unconstitutional when done by the government. And no matter where it happens, if there's any preference based on race, whether it's in schools or grants or regulations or programs or anything that's going on, we will take a look at it, and we will see whether it's susceptible to challenge and whether there's good justification for it. And most of the time there's not, and it's illegal. But we're going to see many, many more of these programs, especially, as I said, under the guise of what they call reparations. That's really what the goal of the liberals in 2023 and 2024 is, to push these programs all over the United States.
Dan Lennington, Deputy Counsel for Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty. Thank you so much for joining me this morning. Keep up the great work. I sincerely appreciate it.
You're welcome.